I've been with
will now be
the
recorded.
organization 25 years, and it's been a wonderful time. We started working with GenCare many years ago to validate their programs and systems for providing safe gluten-free meals for your residents and things like that. So I'm very pleased and have really enjoyed the relationship that we have had. And today what we're going to talk about is giving your immune system a boost, how to snack healthy. Some ideas will be provided in a document that will be on your website so that you can look at those later. They're ideas that not only residents can use in their own living quarters, but also maybe the facilities could use as snack or additions to menu planning. So let's talk about let's look at what we're going to talk about today. We're going to first of all talk about what the immune system is, and then we're going to talk about the nutrients that are important to boosting your immune system, and then look at the foods that support immune health. So just a little bit about the immunity. So immunity is the body's ability to fight off infection. So anytime you get a cold or you get the flu, you scratch your finger, your body sets a process in motion that fights any foreign matters that come into the body, killing that and stopping any kind of infections. The immune system itself is made up of barriers. So the skin is a barrier, your mucous membranes, salivary glands are barriers, as well as interior barriers. So you have gut bacteria that naturally lives in our gut, and that's part of the barrier system as well. These barriers and the body's reactions are what creates the fighting off of invaders or intruders. So the immune system can recognize good invaders and bad invaders. At times, some things will go awry, and that's where you get certain types of diseases. So a bad recognition of an invasion is an example of celiac disease or somebody who has a gluten sensitivity. The body doesn't recognize gluten as being okay, and so it tries to fight it off, and it creates actually damage to the body in the process. And what the immune system does is it launches a response based on what it's seeing in order to stop it from happening. So let's talk a little bit about the innate immune system. There's actually two ways the immune system works. There's an innate immune system. So this is a fast response to invaders. A natural example might be an allergic reaction. If you are allergic to milk and you drink milk, your body immediately goes into action and it starts to fight this reaction that it's having. Again, this includes natural barriers such as the skin or the mucous membranes or the gut bacteria that we have. And these are internal defenses as well as external defenses. Sorry, my computer is working very slowly. Okay. And then there's the adaptive immune system. So this is much slower. It requires hormonal responses. And it includes special cells that fight off infections. So if you've ever heard of beta cells or T cells, these are special cells that are
Cynthia, you're on mute. Could you please unmute? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So these cells help to create antibodies, and they create the reactions that fight the invader. These cells remember that the invader has been there. So when you've had a COVID vaccine, for instance, or you've had a flu shot, or you've had, say, chicken pox, your body remembers that you've had those responses, and it continues to fight for you. Okay. Let me just, I'm really struggling here with my computer to hit the right buttons. Okay, so let's talk about how we acquire immunity. So we acquire immunity by active response. So again, when you get a shot, when you get a vaccine, this is an active introduction of a virus into the body. And what it does is it helps to set up the body to create that long-term adaptive immunity, which will keep you protected for a while. Now, flu shots happen to be a vaccine that you can have, and it's an active exposure, but because the flu changes year over year, that flu shot is really only good for one flu season. But it has a memory, so it remembers this. Passive immunity is short-lived. So mothers who breastfeed, for instance, they give their baby Clostridium, which helps them to develop antibodies and protective immune systems. It helps their immune system to get healthy and to be stronger. But it's very short-term, and the body doesn't remember it after a certain period of time. So let's talk about nutrients that boost the immune system. And the ones we're going to talk about today are these, primarily because they're the most prevalent in immune health. So we'll talk about antioxidants, and oftentimes vitamin A, B6, vitamin C, D, and E, iron, selenium, and zinc are antioxidants. Other foods and nutrients that we'll talk a little bit about are pre and probiotics, herbs, berries, and proteins as well. So let's start with vitamin A. What vitamin A is also known as retinol, and oftentimes we think about vitamin A being associated with eye health. So it helps to promote good eyesight, but it also is important in healthy teeth, bones, and tissues. Not only the building of those, but keeping them and maintaining the strong health of those tissues. It's also important in a healthy pregnancy and breastfeeding. So sometimes pregnant women will be taking a multivitamin, which is higher in vitamin A while they're pregnant. The foods where you find vitamin A are usually yellow and orange foods. So they're yellow peppers and hot peppers, pumpkins, oranges, mandarins, squash, corn, carrots, sweet potatoes, lemons. This is a good vitamin A source, and we should include these in our diet as frequently as we can. Vitamin B6 is also known as pyridoxine. What it does is it helps to produce the white blood cells. So white blood cells are very important to fighting infections. Usually if you're sick, they will take a blood test and they will measure your white blood count. If it's high, it means something's going on in your body. T cells are one of those cells that are fighter cells. So they help to produce either the protective mechanism against an invader or to fight it, or they keep making, keep the food moving along. They regulate immune systems and responses. It's also important in iron production. So your body needs B6 for iron production. It helps to convert proteins, carbohydrates, and fats into energy for the body. And it also, when you produce energy, you get free radicals. It's very important that these free radicals be gotten rid of, and this will help with that process as well. And we only get vitamin B6 from food or supplements. So in foods, you find it in things like chickpeas, nuts, and tofu, red meats, fish, chicken and turkey, potatoes, squash, onions, tomatoes, bananas, raisins, fortified foods. So breakfast cereals are often fortified with B6 or other B vitamins as a whole. Rice can be fortified, and then whole grain waffles and some cheese. So with B6, there's no real rhyme. It's not like it's all yellow, but there are a variety of foods and ways that you can get B6. It's not very often that people are deficient in B6. Vitamin C, also known as the ascorbic acid, helps to protect and keep cells healthy. It's important in the development of healthy skin, bones, tissues, blood vessels, helps with the immune system as well. Very important in wound healing, and it may be useful in delaying some onsets of things like cancer, heart disease, and other diseases. There's some research going on. It's a little bit mixed right now. Vitamin C is very important when you're trying to absorb iron. So oftentimes somebody who is on an iron supplement will also be told to take that iron supplement with vitamin C, such as orange juice, because it helps to absorb that iron better. With plant iron, what we're going to learn is that you need a lot of plant iron to get enough iron in your system. So if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, it makes it harder to get the adequate iron. Taking vitamin C with your food helps you to absorb more of that plant iron. So vitamin C comes from brightly colored fruits and vegetables, the citric vegetables, so oranges, lemons, things like that, purple cabbages, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, pumpkin, peppers, papaya, guava, or excuse me, kiwi, strawberries, currants, tomatoes, spinach, potatoes. Vitamin D is also very important to the body for a number of reasons. It absorbs calcium, and together it keeps your bones stronger. Also, with calcium and vitamin D balance, it helps, or excuse me, when you take calcium and phosphorus together, it helps with that balance to keep it balanced well. It reduces inflammation, and it's important in immunity and cell growth. It can be useful in glucose metabolism. So if you're having sugar absorption issues around blood sugar and things like that, it can help with the absorption of that blood sugar and with the cell growth, as we talked about. The foods where you find vitamin D are the sunshine. It's not a food, but it's the most prominent source of vitamin D. Even in the Pacific Northwest, we can get vitamin D from cloudy, rainy days. So I encourage you to go outside and get some fresh air and some light. Sometimes we get it from Fortified Foods, so oftentimes dairy foods are fortified with vitamin D. You get it from the flesh of fatty fish. So fatty fish would include things like sardines and salmon. You can also get it from soy or almond foods. So sometimes foods are fortified, not only the milk, but almond milk, oat milk can be fortified as well. Liver, cheeses, and egg yolks. It's also important to recognize that calcium phosphorus balance is really important to preventing muscle cramps and muscle spasms, and vitamin D helps with that. So oftentimes people who are taking, say, calcium will also take vitamin D at the same time. With vitamin E, what it does for the body is it helps to get rid of those damaging free radicals that you get when you digest your food. So every time you digest and convert proteins or carbohydrates or any of your food into nutrients and things that the body can use, you get free radicals. Vitamin E helps to get rid of those. It boosts immunity, and it can prevent clotting formation. So sometimes people who are having heart issues or having major clotting problems may be prescribed some extra vitamin E to take as well. And it may have some benefit in chronic illnesses. And again, that's research that's being worked on, but it may be something that we will see in the future. So where do you find it? You find it in plant foods that have oils. So like nuts, avocados, olives, seeds, some fruits and vegetables. You'll find it in, for instance, pumpkins and mangoes, avocados we talked about. but mostly in nuts, oils, and seeds. As far as iron goes, it's important to maintaining good blood cells. Iron makes hemoglobin, and that hemoglobin is needed to carry your oxygen from your lungs to the rest of your body. So it's very important. It is important in the growth and development and hormones production. And this is again where I want to just reemphasize, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan and you don't eat meat products, especially red meats, it takes twice as much iron to get the amount of iron your body needs each day. And so that's why it's important to also then take something with citric acid or vitamin C, like orange juice, to help absorb those the iron you can get from your foods. So most of the time you'll find iron in meats, lean meats, seafood, poultry, organ meats. A long time ago, farmers ate a lot of organ meats. That's where you'll find a lot of iron. You'll find iron fortified foods, so they are putting iron in some of our normal foods that we eat. Beans, peas, lentils, legumes, all of those are really rich in iron, spinach also. Some nuts and dried fruits, especially raisins, have good sources of iron. And again, make sure you take some vitamin C. So eat tomatoes with your lunch each day, maybe some orange juice in the morning, and something that like potatoes or squash in the evening when you have a meal. Selenium is an essential nutrient. What that means is your body requires it. And when you have selenium needs, you get all the selenium you need from your food. And it's a very small amount that the body needs, but it's very, very important that you not be selenium deficient. And it would be really hard to have a deficiency. Part of what it does is it's part of a number of different proteins that have critical roles, including immunity and fighting infections. Let's see. Where we find it is in common foods like whole grain breads and cereals, poultry, red meats, eggs, Brazil nuts versus other nuts, sunflower seeds, lentils, legumes, and then fin fish and shellfish. Zinc is also very important, and zinc has a number of factors that it helps with. So it helps to fight bacteria and viruses that shouldn't be in the system. It helps in wound healing and having a healthy immune system. It's important in protein and DNA synthesis, so the making of those. In the production, it's important in growth and development and enzymatic reactions that happen in your body to help your body be healthy. It's also important for a proper sense of smell and taste. So sometimes people who are not smelling their foods well, not COVID related, but who are not smelling food well or food doesn't taste quite right, you might be prescribed a little bit of a zinc supplement, and sometimes that can help. So where do you find zinc? You find it in shellfish. So oysters and crabs. You find it in some other seafoods, beef and poultry and pork, nuts and seeds, legumes, wheat germ, although I will caveat this by saying wheat germ is not gluten-free. So if you're celiac or you're on a gluten-free diet, don't use wheat germ. Peanuts and peanut butter, whole grains, and tofu, milk, and fortified cereals. So what other foods should you be including? We would encourage you to make sure that you're using herbs, fresh herbs especially, basil, rosemary, parsley, garlic, ginger. These have all been shown to have some impact on boosting immunity in the body. Consider fragrant spices, so turmeric, cinnamon, black pepper. Those are all considered fragrant spices. And then dark berries like chocolate, apples. Oh, how did apples get on here? currants and things like that, they're all important for providing some added benefit to the immune system. A little bit about pre and probiotics. So what prebiotics are is that they're the precursor to a probiotic. And prebiotics are in your body, and we get them from some food. What they do is they create a healthy bacteria. So our bodies are loaded with bacteria and fungus and other types of bugs, if you will, that impact our health. They're supposed to be in our body, but sometimes they get out of balance, or we get invading bacteria or bugs that shouldn't be there, and they just make us ill. So an example of your body's normal microbiome or gut flora are other terms that are often used. Getting out of balance is if you get sick and you get an infection and you're placed on an antibiotic. Those antibiotics often destroy everything, not just what the problem is. And what happens with some people who are on antibiotics long term is they get diarrhea. That diarrhea is because the good bugs in our body have been destroyed, and we need those to have a healthy system. So it's really important to make sure we're taking care of that. They're also important in gut health, in vitamin production, and neutralizing toxins, things that shouldn't be in our body. And they may be helpful in reducing inflammation. So we are seeing a lot of science and research on inflammation reduction by making sure we're taking adequate probiotics and have prebiotics in our diet. So where we find these, prebiotics are insoluble fibers. Basically what that means is we don't digest them very well. They're oftentimes the things that give us gas because they don't pass through, they don't digest in our system, so they're creating gas and fermenting as they go through. They're oftentimes found in raw foods. So things like garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus, dandelion greens, bananas, seaweeds, fruits and vegetables, whole grains like wheat, again, not gluten-free, oats, those are all prebiotics. They make a healthy system for us. Probiotics are oftentimes fermented foods. And for a probiotic to be beneficial, it has to remain alive. So when you decide to take a probiotic and you take a probiotic that is dry and in a capsule, unless it has to be refrigerated, and that's a key. If it's not refrigerated, it's not alive. You want a probiotic that is alive. And these can also be found in fermented foods. So fermented foods might include things like yogurts or kimchi, pickled vegetables, sauerkraut, miso, things like that, kombucha tea. Again, they're fermented foods, and that fermentation is what makes it a probiotic. You can find some probiotics in things like yogurt. However, there is debate about the benefit of probiotics in yogurt, how much is really in it, and how much benefit it gives you. So what else can you do? It's really important to stay healthy. And what that means is you should be eating balanced meals and snacks. So you should get some protein, whether it's vegetable protein from nuts and legumes or meat products. You should include probiotic or prebiotic foods in your diet. You should eat brightly colored fruits and vegetables. So we talk about eating the rainbow. Make sure your plate is colorful. Get plenty of sleep. Oftentimes we don't sleep enough. And during this pandemic, we find that sleep is disrupted significantly. And what that's causing is people to become sick because they're not getting as much rest as they need. Don't smoke. When you smoke, you are compromising your immune system. Exercise regularly. So this doesn't need to be real vigorous, but get outside, go for a walk, do some laps around the gym. Make sure that you're getting your heart rate up a little bit, at least 3 times a week. And make sure you've got really good hygiene habits. Wash your hands, make sure that you're using sanitizer during this pandemic so that you remain as healthy as possible. So in conclusion, make sure that you're eating colorful foods. Make sure you're getting adequate protein. It doesn't take a lot, but you need protein for your iron intake. Protein helps to fight infections. You need all of these foods just to keep your immune system healthy. And if you eat across the rainbow, eating brightly colored foods, you can make sure that you're doing your best to keep your immune system healthy. I would also encourage that if you feel like you're getting sick, do something about it. Take action. Today is not the time in our life when we need to say, oh, it'll pass. Make sure you do something about it, because this pandemic is not fun, and too many people are having serious consequences after having COVID. So at this point, I'd like to address your questions and to take any other additional questions. Tricia, can you help me with that question list again?
Sure. So we have some questions that were submitted ahead of time. Does smoking really make me more susceptible to illness?
It makes you more susceptible to cancers for sure, and it does compromise the immune system. So yes, smoking does make you more susceptible.
Okay. Let's see. Second question, does stress affect my immune system?
Absolutely. Stress is one of the big factors that is being studied during the pandemic. And what we know is stress can increase and agitate things like immunity, inflammation. Stress can send free radicals going crazy in your body. It's really important to try and control that. And so I encourage that you have ways to deal with it. Coping mechanisms might include being able to talk to people. And today that unfortunately is usually on Zoom or some other method, but reach out, don't isolate yourself. Make sure that you're maintaining the contact with people and find ways to decrease your stress. That might include things like meditation or finding a hobby that just allows you to kind of breathe and calm yourself.
Great. Is there a limit to how much vitamin C I can take?
Very good question. So part of the vitamins we talked about today are fat-soluble vitamins, and part of them are water-soluble. Vitamin C is a water-soluble vitamin, which basically means is if you take too much vitamin C and your body can't use it and absorb it, you're going to pee it out. So you can take all the vitamin C you want, it's not going to hurt you, but you may be wasting money too.
Okay. Is walking out in the weather good or bad for me during this time? I'm assuming that by the weather here in Seattle, they would be referring to cold, wet, dreary, and gray.
Mm-hmm. So even cold, wet, dreary, and gray, being outside is refreshing. You can get vitamin D. I find it to be one of my calming effects. So when I'm stressed out, I'm having a bad day, all I have to do is go outside for a few minutes and I feel better. Pollution definitely can play a part in immune health, but when it's rainy and dreary, we're actually washing pollution out of the air. So I would encourage you as much as possible, get outside and just get some fresh air.
That's interesting. Okay. Is it better for me to remain away from others?
During the pandemic, social distancing is important. If you have a contagious disease, if your immune system is compromised and you're concerned about other health conditions, it might be more important to socially distance, but follow the CDC guidelines and whatever guidelines GenCare has set for you. And so I would wear a mask when outside. I would follow the CDC guidelines. I have a very small core of people that I'm in touch with. I think it's about 5. And outside of that circle, I'm uncomfortable because I just don't want to have COVID.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what vitamins are the best immune system builders?
Okay. So like the ones we talked
top three or 4.
Okay, I would say the ones we talked about today, so definitely vitamin C, vitamin A, B, and probably D would be the top ones I would choose. If you wanted to supplement your diet with a good multivitamin, you could do that. It wouldn't hurt you. Make sure that the vitamin you choose, though, is age and gender specific. So for me, a prenatal vitamin is not a good idea. I'm not pregnant, but something that is specific to my age, so a senior vitamin meant for women is more important. And there is a difference between vitamin needs for men and women, and that's why I say it needs to be gender specific.
Okay, great. So a multivitamin could suffice.
Sure.
Okay. And then you did talk a little bit about vitamin B, but more specifically, does vitamin B help my immune system?
So the B vitamins in of themselves are important to health. So B6, the pyridoxine, definitely is important to your immune health. But overall, B vitamins are so important, especially as we age. They help us with cognitive retention. So if we're having struggles with memory, they help us with memory. They help our skin. They help our nervous system. I would say yes, B vitamins are very important, not only to immunity, but to other aspects of our health.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cynthia. I'm going to attempt to unmute here all the participants, and if anyone has a question that they would like to ask, we'll try this and see how this goes. If you have a question that you would like to ask, you can unmute on your end and just go ahead and ask it. If you're not asking a question, if you could mute yourself, though, that would be great. I don't know who all is on the call, otherwise I would call on you, but you're showing up as NA, so Betty would like to know something about vitamin B12.
Okay. All right. B12 is an important vitamin. It can prevent pernicious anemia, which is a very specific type of anemia, not necessarily related to iron. Most people do not experience pernicious anemia, but B12 can also help with immunity. It helps with the nervous system as well. So if you're struggling with say tactile stimulation, sometimes taking B12 can help with that. People who are low in B12 vitamins oftentimes will become tired more easily, just like they would if they had an iron deficiency, but they're very 2 different types of deficiencies. And I have to apologize off the top of my head, I can't list off the B12 type of nutrients, You can get B12 supplements that I would caution you in using. As I said, it is very rare to have pernicious anemia, which is a result of B12 deficiencies. So most people don't need to take B12. Most of the B vitamins come from grains. So people with celiac disease or who are following a gluten-free diet often have low B vitamins in general. And so if you can include whole grains in your diet, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a question? You can also type a question in the chat box if you'd like.
If you have a question, I can try. But I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
I always wonder about multiple vitamins. These are all, I know they talk a little bit, but a lot of these are just specific vitamins. How about multivitamins? That's just as good just to take multivitamins? You get all of them.
Yeah, that's what I take. The same thing you do. What's in yours?
Hey, Trish, this is Bryce in Federal Way. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Great. We just had a question about multivitamins. I know that was covered briefly already, but maybe elaborating a little bit more about the importance of taking a multivitamin and how it can be, instead of getting those vitamins in the foods that you're eating, if you feel like you're not getting enough from the foods that you eat.
Yep, got it. Okay. Cynthia? Whoops, sorry, I muted you. Thank you.
It's okay. So, as a dietitian, I would always encourage you to get your nutrients from your food. But let's face it, it's really hard sometimes to get enough vitamin C or to eat enough vegetables and fruits to make sure your diet is well balanced. So I have no objection to a good multivitamin. They can't hurt you. Where I would get concerned is if you just start taking a lot of fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. Those would be vitamins I would be very concerned if you start taking doses up. But as a good multivitamin, those will be there. And again, you just need to make sure it's age and gender specific.
Great, thank you so much, Federal Way.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
When's the time to take the vitamins? Morning, afternoon, noon, or night?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Was the question, is the best time to take the vitamin morning, noon, or night?
Yeah.
Yes, that was the question.
Okay. So taking your vitamins it can be tricky. Taking calcium at night is helpful to your bones. Taking iron at night is helpful to absorbing more iron and having less GI distress, because iron can cause GI distress, but you can't take them together because one will sort of glue the other one and not make it work. It doesn't really matter when you take a multivitamin as long as you're taking it consistently. So if you take morning meds, I would just add it to your morning meds. Ideally, I would suggest that taking your vitamins at night is probably easier on your system. Some people will have distress from vitamins, especially if they're less processed vitamins. So there are certain vitamin brands that my gut just doesn't like. It's not because they're bad. It's just because they don't have as much processing as other vitamins. They don't have coatings on them. And so I would take those at night because I have less GI stress from it.
Okay. Interesting. Great question. Thank you.
What's your favorite vitamin?
Vitamin or supplement?
Either one.
Well, personally, I'm really fond of citric type foods and tomatoes. So, you know, I can buy a pound and a half of cherry tomatoes and they'll never make it home because I'm eating them in the car. If I'm talking about vitamin supplements, I think the Centrum Silver vitamins are probably one of the better brands. But then I like vitamins that are more natural too. So Nature Made is a vitamin that I also have a tendency to be drawn to.
Okay. Anyone else? Cynthia, before we wrap it up, would you like to just speak for a minute or two about what you do for GenCare?
Sure. So the Gluten Intolerance Group, we're a nonprofit organization that not only supports people who live gluten-free, but we also have food safety programs, and we have two. The food safety program that we work with GenCare is to validate and make sure that the processes and procedures used by the kitchen are designed to make sure that any meals being served gluten-free are truly gluten-free, so that if you are a resident and you're gluten-free, you don't have to worry about it. What's interesting about the process, I've worked with Marvon for many years, and in the process of designing the program for GenCare related to gluten, you also then start to look at other allergens, and you can set up similar processes and procedures. So we take a look at menus, we take a look at the products and ingredients that are being bought. We make sure that recipes are properly vetted so that we know when they're gluten-free or not. And then we also do a site inspection. So we send an auditor into the facility. They're looking at what are the steps that people use in the kitchen to make sure that the processes are truly gluten-free. We look at training and education that the staff has to go through. How do you mark menus so that your residents will know whether a product is gluten-free or not? I love GenCare's philosophy about whole foods. So we want to make sure that where we can, whole foods are also offered to people who are gluten-free. And GenCare's menus work really well into that. So you're not using a lot of processed foods that are unnecessary. So GenCare's menus are actually much healthier in many ways than other resident facilities. And we usually come into each residence at least once a year. We're not only looking at the menus, but if a residency facility has snacks, or in some of them, I don't know if they're still there, you have a coffee bar or something and you put out cookies and things. If you're putting out gluten-free cookies, how are those protected? How do the residents know? That kind of thing.
Yes, hopefully we will return to bistro life again at some point, but not right now.
I know.
Cynthia, are we the only retirement living community company that you certify and work with?
Yes. So at this point in time, GenCare is the only retirement system that we work with. The challenge that others face is they're usually on pretty tight budgets for their food and don't have a lot of commitment to being able to do much more than offer a normal meal, where GenCare goes an extra step to make sure that they can facilitate needs that residents have around their health and stuff. So you're offering, reduced salt, or you're offering meals that don't have necessarily a lot of sugar. You take care of other allergens. And this is just one more step. We as an organization do a lot of talking to retirement and resident facilities to try and help them understand that this is possible and that they can do this without it costing a lot of money. So GenCare is the model. We stand in front of people and say, look, it can be done. And my hope is after this talk, we'll have the ability to do some PR and marketing for GenCare for what they have done.
Yep, that's great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
One more go around to see if anybody has any more questions before we sign off.
Yes, I do. How many glasses of water should we drink a day?
Ideally, you should be drinking about, they say 6 to 8, so that's hard. And we're talking about 1 cup, so 8 ounces. You know, my coffee cup is probably a cup and a half. So if I drink 4 or 5 of those a day, that would be ideal. But keep in mind that it's liquid you need. And so it could be water, it could be soda, although that's not the best for you. It could be other types of liquids. It could be from your soup or things like that. So you just need to drink liquid. Staying hydrated is very important for the body to be able to function right. And so I would encourage you, you know, just have a cup beside you and periodically take a sip. I carry a water bottle around with me all the time. And if you don't like water, I don't like water. So if you don't like water, oftentimes you can fool yourself into drinking it. Oftentimes I will add a little bit of apple juice or cranberry juice. You can throw lemon squeezes in it. You can put in small pieces of melon or something like that. And that will help to flavor the water just a little bit so that I will drink it.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending. We appreciate you being here. And Cynthia, thank you so much. It was very informative and a pleasure. And hopefully it did record.
Okay. Well, and Tricia, thank you for inviting me. If you ever want, I do another talk with residents about vitamins and minerals in general for the aging. And it tends to be fun because everything points to the fact that we lose our memory, we lose our sense of touch, our sensory, we lose our nerve health, we lose our skin health, and everything revolves around making that work better. So
Absolutely.
it can be a fun talk.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And everybody have a great day.
Thank you.